So that was a good yard. How busy it was going in and going out. As we know now, all the goods trains had to cross the fast line to get to it, the only one, and the line between Bedford and St Pancras. So we start to go down, let me have a look, point it out here. Dunstable Road, where are we? Right, that black spot there is the Swan. The Swan's miles away from water. I'll tell you how it got there eventually. The next building we come to on the left-hand side was Bowley's. Bowley's trucks and brushes and paints, etc. I presume there was a Mr. Bowley, but I've never met him. And his manager's name was Woods, and his nickname was Slacker Woods. We carry on a bit farther down there, and we come to on the left-hand side, still on Dunstable Road, the vicarage. The vicarage wasn't knocked down, it was taken down. Whether it was taken down because the cost of bricks was enormous, or you couldn't get bricks, and they built the first two houses that go into the estate with those bricks. The second vicar that was there, that was involved with my getting married, etc., was Reverend Richard Ball. Now, Reverend Richard Ball got promotion. He was then called Cannonball. We go a little bit farther, and on that side of the road, there's a brick wall. Us boys, we knew where all the fruits were there. When the cherries were ripe, the apples were ripe, and that's where we go scrumping. And I would like the councillors to listen to this, because I could be wrong, and I could be right. In the gardens there, on the right-hand side, there's two Canadian redwood cedar trees. They are called Wellingtonians. The government at the time, in 1815, said that every village, every town, should have one of these trees planted in a prominent place. And that's where our trees are planted, I think, and they're still there now. If I'm correct, I think they should put a tree preservation order on them. They were called Wellingtonians because winning in the Battle of Waterloo, when we took Napoleon to flight the Isle of Elba in 1815. The trees are still there now, there's two of them, and there aren't many around. I don't think Hampton's got one left, but I could be wrong there.
Is that on the right-hand side as you're going down?
Yeah.
Is that on the right-hand side as you're going down?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Right, we carry on down a bit farther, we come to the school on the left-hand side. The caretaker's name was Mrs. Lowe. The school headmaster was a man called Charlie Allen. The lady there was with one of the teachers. The other two or three was Miss Sharp and Miss Chatterton that came on the train from Bedford. And also there was a schoolmaster there called Mr. Hampton. He came down with evacuees. And I think he had a wooden leg, which I guess he got injured in the 1418 war. Right, yeah, sorry, I missed a bit, I'll come back a bit. Right, the school, we were taught there, we were each given a third of a pint of bottle of milk each day. Once a fortnight or once a week, we were given a spoonful of cod liver oil and malt. And once a month, word went round, the knit nurse is coming. The knit nurse came, and out came the DTT power, and we all had to have DTT sprung on our head. It was condemned in the end, not be saved, but we survived, we're still here. Across the road, and I've gone a bit too far now, across the road, there was an artist, a landscape artist, called Mr. Stannard. Anybody who's got his paintings, I think someone's got some paintings, They're worth a lot of money now. I sat next to his son Bill. Next to the church, next to the school, was the blacksmith shop, a man called Ron Carr. Next to the blacksmith shop was the village pond. It's now been filled up, and there's the row of shops there now. On the opposite side of the road was the wheelwrights, the bunkers. The bunkers could make wooden wheels. They made the hub, the spokes, and the fellies, the bits that go around the outside of the wheel. Once they'd made this wooden wheel, they would take it across the roll car to put the steel tyre on it. Now, the steel tyre, he calculated, today we would say it's the coefficient of linear expansion, but he would use a piece of string to put it round the diameter of the wheel, which is pi d, 3.1416 times the diameter, piece of string round it, and he would perhaps cut 2 inches off the end of the piece of string. And he would make his steel that much too, the circle of the steel tyre, that much too tight, so it wouldn't fit. He would then deliberately heat it cherry red, all the way around cherry red, until it expanded. Once it expanded, he would then put the steel tyre over the wooden wheel and quickly throw it into the pond before it caught fire. As soon as it was in the water, it then contracted and it pulled all the spokes and all the fellies tight together again. That was the bunker family did the wheelwrights. The buildings are no longer there, and the roll car was the blacksmith shop's no longer there. We move on a little bit now, down to Horn's End. Right at the end of Horn's End was the farm, and the man that owned the farm was a Frank Britton. Worthy End Farm it was called. Now he had a shepherd, and the shepherd's name was Frank Harris, and his wife's name was Hannah. The farthest he'd ever been from Flitwick was perhaps Aptal, perhaps Wasmin, perhaps Aptal. And when you talk to him, he would say in his Flitwick accent, "My wife Hannah, she does like a hake. I get the hakes from the henners, where the hens are." Translated, he puts H in the wrong place, but I think that's a lot of Flitwick people did the same thing. It was Hannah, an egg, hen house, and hens. We come back to the corner now, and the fir tree. The fir tree is no more, but there's a tree there to represent it. Opposite side of the road was a pub, and the pub was called the Swan. When they built the railway, they built the Swan that is today, but they couldn't get a licence for it. So they transferred the licence from the Swan at the bottom of Church Road to the Swan by the railway bridge. What was the Swan became a dairy. Opposite side of the road was Home Farm, farmed by a man called Wilfred Abbott. And his grandson's here today. I don't know if he'd like to say a few words. Thank you, Richard.
Try not to bore you too long. My grandfather had a farm, the buildings you may remember, were right at the bottom of Church Road, right at the bottom of Church Road, and there was some flat buildings made of wood and planks, and somebody may remember them, and he farmed all this area that's now estate, apart from the side of Stephanie Road, which is allotments, and we went right up to Flitwick Wood, and then even Templeford, where the mound is now, and the dew pond, and also across the road into Flitwick into Parsons Hill, and then Flitwick Manor Park. He had all that, but he rented that off of the owner of Flitwick Park, who was John Loyal, member of the Brooks family before that, and my grandfather Wilfrid, he had several men work for him. Some of you may remember the names of Freddie Himmel, he was the cowman. There was him, I remember, Wally Scott, Jack Bunker, and Mr. Brightman, George Brightman. And Freddie Himmel was a prisoner of war, and he stayed with Grandad all the time till the farm deceased. And I can remember, and you wouldn't believe it today, the cows used to come across the Western Road into Manor Park, and when he brought them back for milking, they would just come out the farm gate onto the Western Road on their own and walk into Manor Park. You can't imagine that today. It's incredible. And also I remember as a lad, well, there was an Ernie Sawyer who was a horseman, and I can remember as a lad bringing Prince, a horse he had, across the road to Roland cars for shoeing. And that's about all I remember today.
Thank you, Richard. I mentioned some nicknames earlier. Some of the people that visited the pubs, one's name was Ratty Lane. His brother, of course, was called Mountain Lane. Ratty Lane used to brag, my families never had butcher's meat in their lives. He was a poacher. And he got away with it for years, until one day he drunk too much porter and the beer started to talk. I said, they can't catch me. I always wear the visitor's shoes and they're looking for the wrong person. That was Ratty Lane, and his brother was called Mousy Lane. So we now go up Church Road. On the left-hand side, we come to a little building, which isn't there anymore, where the village bio was kept. The village bio was a truck when the coffins went on. Instead of having a funeral hearse, where you had the village bio. The owners of the Flitwick Manor were the Lyles, as Richard has said, and the entrance was, the main entrance was at the bottom. At the top past the church, on the left-hand side, the second entrance, was a thatched house where Freddie Himmel lived, the prisoner of war that Richard had just been talking about. A bit farther on, we come to Long Close, and people called Blundell's there, Mr. Blundell and Miss Blundell. He owned a lot of the property in George Street, Luton. We then come to the next farm, which is called... Sorry. Which is called Wood Farm. And that was farmed by a man called Billy Britton. So we had the A for Abbas and B for Britain in Wood Farm. We carry on farther up the road and we come to Priestley Farm. Priestley Farm was farmed by Walter Cole. So we had the ABC of Church Road. The top two farms were owned by the Duke of Bedford, Woburn Estates. But when they had two deaths in quick succession, they had to sell the land to pay death duties, and the council bought Priestley Farm. And I think the council, Bedford County Council, still own it. One of the responsibility of the tenant of the farm was to make sure that the river diverted itself to fill up the lake. But the rest of the water went down by the Hardy Vale cricket ground, down to the Flitwick Mill. We carry on farther up Church Road, and we come to where a man called Norris He was the head gamekeeper for the whole of Woburn Estates. Very important chap and responsible for a lot of land. And that takes us really from one end of the village to the other in quick succession. Thank you.